This is the back pain fix that I wish I knew earlier. It would have saved me years of frustration. And it's not just for me, it's for every athlete, every parent, and every professional that I've worked with since. If you're watching this, chances are that pain is ruining your life. You may wake up every morning hoping that it's gone. And you could have tried stretching, you could have tried physio, and you could have tried resting, only to be in the same position over and over again. Maybe now you're in a position that you're afraid to move in case that you make it worse. I get it. I spent years believing the same myths that everyone has about pain. And that belief, it didn't just hinder my recovery, it actually kept me stuck. But here's what I learned. Pain isn't about the body, it's about how you react to it. And the way that I used to treat it, and the way that so many people still treat it, is the exact reason that people are chained by pain. And before I show you what changed and the exact framework that I now use, let's go back to where it all started. So I grew up in a small village in rural Ireland, and there's probably about 400 people in the village. So there's no shops, there's no public transport, and not too many people around, obviously. So sports became my real drive. It was my community, it's where I met people, it was what kept me focused. I loved the competitive aspect of it. And to be honest, I loved the discipline of it as well. I started boxing when I was probably about 5 years old because my father was actually the coach of the club, one of his closest friends. I also played sports like football, gymnastics, rugby, played a little bit of volleyball in school, all of these other sports. But at a certain point, I had to decide what was most important. And do I continue playing all these other sports, or do I just stick to one? Now, the biggest issue that I had run into was that rugby and boxing season were the same. And rugby, you keep your weight up. Boxing, you're trying to keep your weight down. So I decided to go with boxing, obviously because my father was a coach, but the other side of it was that I liked the individual aspect of it. The fact that if I win, it's all on me. And if I lose, it's all on me either. So there was no one to blame, and there was a responsibility aspect to that. When I was 16 years old, I got called up to the Munster High Performance Squad. Now, this was a squad put together after the London Olympics, and it was a plan in preparation for the Rio Olympics. And the goal was basically to train boxers, to try get them onto the international team and to push towards an Olympic platform after that. In that situation, that's when I really decided that boxing was going to become my life. And it was what I put all my focus into. As a teenager, I had no parties, didn't really have any social events unless it was related to boxing, and my entire life revolved around it. Training the mind, and training the body. I remember when I was 17 years old, that we had actually just won the under-18 championship with football, and at the end of the match, when everyone was up, celebrating, lifting the trophy, planning to go out for a few after, I was actually in the dressing room packing up all my stuff because we had to drive 3 hours across the country after playing a 60-minute match because I had a fight that night. That was a sacrifice that you had to make with boxing. And to be honest, the sacrifice did pay off. When I got to college, I got a scholarship for it, and this really helped me to dive into it even more so I could learn more about the body, about the mind, and about the training and performance aspect of it. Now, Munster training was grueling. It was a 3-hour session in the morning and it was a 3-hour session in the afternoon. So it was conditioning first and then technical after. And the goal of the training was to break you. And they said that so often. If you couldn't keep up with it, you didn't belong there. And I remember after one training, our mental performance coach brought us in, set us down, and he said, "An iron bar does not bend." And I remember at the time thinking, I was kind of laughing or smiling a little bit. I was thinking, do we understand what you mean by this? But it was reinforced during training. It was constantly said while we were going through these grueling sessions, the idea of an iron bar doesn't bend was often relayed back to us. And the idea was that pain wasn't just physical, it was mental. And if you could control the mental side of pain, you could control the physical more, and you could push your body further. And I thought at this time that I actually understood what pain was. So boxing conditioned us to tolerate pain. We used to sit in a wall sit against the wall while somebody punched us in the stomach at training. We used to lie down and do sit-ups while someone dropped a medicine ball. We used to literally walk around with our arms out to the side, doing circles until somebody quit first. That was the type of training that we did. And the goal was really to harden the mind. But then one fight changed absolutely everything that I knew about pain. It was the Irish Collegiate Final, and the guy I was fighting, I had actually boxed him twice that year, and he was just off the back of the world quarterfinals. So I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just go in there and start swinging. So in the first round, I spotted a little pattern. When I was throwing a double jab, he was coming back with a left hook and a right hand. So perfect. In boxing, you're always trying to pick out patterns and you're trying to beat them. I said, I'm going to throw a jab, fake, half step, and throw an overhand right. I waited, throw my double jab, half step back, absolutely launched an overhand right. And as soon as I did, right away, everything went dark. I had stars in my eyes and I could feel like somebody was pushing a cold bag of ice up against my face. After a couple of seconds, I was getting these piercing pains beside my nose, and then that started to flush back across my face as really started to heat up. Then the pain started to ring through, and I just realized as I threw the overhand right, he threw an uppercut and he broke my nose. That was round number 1, but the referee didn't see it. So the round ends, I go back to the corner. I say to my father, I can't see a thing. We go through the motions, we get everything going again, and it's round 2. I remember walking out, putting my guard up, him hitting my guard, and me feeling my nose shift position. I could feel it cracking over to the side, grinding across. I remember at the time thinking, whew, this is going to be a difficult fight. I had a choice in that situation. I can quit now, stop, and get rid of the pain, or I can find a new strategy. And that's where the idea of an iron bar doesn't bend comes into play. I remember thinking that at the time, iron bar doesn't bend. The pain is actually not there anymore. Over time, just from repeating these things myself and repeating these anchors, the pain actually subsided. I was still getting hit. I could still feel the warm, fuzzy part of my face, but I wasn't getting that striking pain every single time. So I realized that, okay, with my thoughts, I can control this a little bit more. Now, I finished out the fight. I lost, unfortunately, but I came away with a way bigger lesson. The lesson was that pain is an interpretation. How you interpret pain impacts how you experience pain. So it's not your pain that's the problem, it's how you react. And most people don't realize this and they get stuck in the trap, and then it's actually the fear of pain itself that gives them more problems. Now, I didn't realize this until I went through it, and then I started to notice it in my clients after. Now, you might think that, yeah, that's boxing, you're training for it, that's the way it is. It's a mindset side of things. And okay, that could be it. Think about this. Sandra jumped on board with me over COVID. She had a bulging disc, and the disc had gotten so bad that I actually left her bedbound. Put her in a position that she was lying in bed, staring at the roof and really fearing sitting up, because she knew then that the pain would just kick off again. Everything would lock up. This left her feeling really fragile in her body. It left her in a position that her identity revolved around pain, and all she did was talk about pain with people around her, and they talked about it with her as well. So they were always going over and back. How are you doing? How's your back getting on? So this became a big issue, and her identity started to change. She started to feel like she was frail and that her body wasn't working with her. It was actually working against her. So what we did is we change that focus. We looked at understanding pain a little bit more and understanding flare-ups. Understanding that not every pain that we get means that we're actually doing damage. So Sandra thought that she had to get rid of pain completely before she could start moving again. And that was the problem. Once we started to change how she interpreted the pain and experienced the pain, then she started to get her confidence back and her fear started to drop off. And once the fear started to drop, she started to regain her confidence. So how do we do it? We reframed pain and we understood that, okay, not every pain means that we're doing damage. And then we started to rebuild confidence through little movements and little exercises that were progressing over time. And at the end of that, then we started to gradually return back into exercises that she enjoyed. Probably wouldn't even believe it, but in 20 weeks, she went from being bedbound in pain to running a marathon. That was a huge identity shift for her. That's something that if you're in pain, you need to understand. With the change, you need to have an identity change as well. So when I was in my undergraduate, a huge part of it was that pain equals damage. This is something that was thought. If somebody has a sore ankle, they probably sprained it. But this didn't really explain why people were still in pain a year or two later. Then I went into my master's, and I remember one specific lecture that really stood out to me. The professor put up on the board one statement. It said that 95% of non-specific low back pain has no physical cause. If that's the case, how would so many people be in pain? And if there's actually nothing wrong? Well, that's not actually the case. When you dive into the research more, you can see that 50% of people over 30 have degenerative disc disease. 1 in 3 have a bulging disc, and both of those have no pain. That's asymptomatic individuals. So in this case, you don't need a new spine. You just need a new strategy. That's actually something that one of my clients who was a nurse said to me after going through the course, is that she said that she had thought that she understood pain and she was acting in a way that felt right to her. But because of that, she felt that she was broken. The more she learned about what was going on, the more she realized that the misinformation that people have on pain right now is actually what's keeping them stuck. Pain isn't about an injury. Pain is an alarm system in your body. And sometimes that alarm system can get stuck on high. And that's when you get a chronic issue. So I wasn't just learning about this in textbooks. It was something that I had to live as well. 2 years ago, I had 2 bulging discs in my neck. And When I noticed that that was the case, I said, okay, I'm going to rest, I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to give it a chance. At first, I thought it was a little bit of a strain or a muscle issue, but then I'd noticed at the end of the week, everything would lock up. I'd start getting this sharp, icy feeling shooting down my arm, and anyone who's had a bulging disc understands that feeling. And as a result, everything would tighten up. I wouldn't be able to turn my head or look around. I remember one specific time when I was back, I was on a Friday evening, I was lying down. The thing I looked forward to most was the cold side of the pillow, where I could turn it over and I'd lie on the cold side, because that gave me so much relief. But it wasn't just the pain, it was actually the fear of the pain as well that started to really get to me, because I was preparing for a jiu-jitsu competition at the time. I was wondering, if I stay training, is this only going to get worse? Am I going to put myself in a really bad position here? And will it ever actually be right again? And that fear is what kept me stuck, because what I started to do is wait it out. Too many people get stuck in this position that they're trying to wait the pain out, give it a little bit more time, it'll be okay. But that's actually a huge problem. So I started to rest, and I noticed that it wouldn't go away. I started to stretch, and I noticed that certain movements would cause it to flare up. And then I started to ignore it, and deep down I knew that there was an issue that needed to be dealt with. And what I really noticed is that the actual model was flawed. So I did what I always do, and I went diving into the research to see if I could figure out a way to fix it. I began to think back on my time in college and the injuries that I had. And I realized that, okay, pain isn't just about the injury, it's about the body and how it reacts. And not just because we have pain doesn't mean that we're doing damage. So I put a plan together. I focused on adjusting my training. I didn't want to get out of it completely, but I made sure that my recovery was right. Then I optimized my lifestyle so that my diet was good, that I had activity during the day, that I was sleeping well, and that I was hydrating. And then lastly, I actually tracked my stress and the pain patterns. I started to pick up on times that it was kicking up more. I knew that jiu-jitsu was going to be a contributor, but what I noticed is that it really only flared up on a Friday and Saturday at the end of a long week. If I'm being honest, at the start, when I was going through this, it really didn't feel like it was improving. And that's an issue that people run into when they're looking at pain, is that it's never really linear. Doubts started to creep in. Is it my new normal? Is this what I'm going to be stuck with? But I focused on what I could control, and I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, and that if I stayed consistent with the small things, it would improve. And slowly things started to shift. My strength started to improve. The flare-ups were less frequent, and now my confidence started to grow, so I could up my training. I got back to training 9 times per week, and it took about 6 weeks to get to that point. And the goal at that was to get back to competition. And I knew that that was going to be the real test, because my training partners knew I was dealing with it, but the competition guys, they did not care that I was dealing with it. I was lucky, got back into a competition. It was the Argentinian Championship, and I was happy to take first place in that. For me, this wasn't just a comeback. It was actually about proof. It was proof that pain isn't just about the injury, and that fear can often hold us in a position for longer than we should be in that position, because it stops us doing things that we should be doing. And movement done the right way can make a huge difference. And I started to see the patterns. I started to see it in my clients as well. Some approaches worked for some people, other ones kept them stuck. And I started applying different approaches then, and I noticed that sometimes it's not about the exercises that you do. There's a huge aspect of it needs to be how you interpret pain. And as I started to test different approaches, I noticed that the people who got better weren't the ones who just had stretches or did new exercises. It was actually the ones who completely changed how they thought about pain. And that's when it started to come together. I started to realize I wasn't just helping people fix pain, it's helping people start to rebuild confidence in their movements and in their exercise. And as I started to refine it, I realized that this doesn't just work for me. This works for people who are in the Premier League, works for international rugby players, works for parents, and it works for professionals who are on a busy schedule. It also works for those who are afraid and think that they will never get back to exercise. And that's when I started to develop the back pain, back to exercise framework. This wasn't just about getting over the back pain. It was about reprogramming your mind and your body so that pain isn't the boss, so that you start having more confidence in your movement and that you actually have a graded return to play. And I found that the process didn't just help people recover, it actually helped them transform themselves and start to change their identity. And it's something that I've been guiding people through every day. But then just as I started to think I had it all figured out, 2 weeks later, after that jiu-jitsu competition, I tear my ACL. No, this one was different. I had been through broken noses, concussions, broken ribs, all through boxing, but this was a real instability in my knee, and it came with the sharpest grinding pain. The funny little side story is that at the time when I tore it in the competition, it was in Argentina, there was a petrol shortage, so there was no ambulance or medics, so I didn't have crutches or anything, and afterwards I had to walk 2 kilometers to the closest bus stop. I had to try catch a bus to go home. It's not ideal, but good for pain tolerance. Afterwards though, I started to convince myself it wasn't an ACL tear. I started to say that it's just a sprain or it's a muscle issue. or that it will be healed up pretty quickly. Because I knew that if it was an ACL, that was going to take months, and I didn't want to face that at the time. And then 2 weeks later, reality hit home. I was crossing a street in Buenos Aires and the car came speeding towards me. I jumped to try land on the curb, and as I landed, my knee just completely shifted out of position. The grinding pain was unbelievable, and I just collapsed to the floor. I could not stand on that leg after. And that's when I had realized that it was time to go to see an orthopedic surgeon. And he said to me that if you want to get back playing football, or if you want to do a high velocity sport, that you have to do surgery. But unfortunately, surgery wasn't an option because I was moving to Brazil 2 weeks later. So I couldn't do it at the time. I remember thinking, do I have to accept this now as just, this is my competitive career? Or am I able to actually rehab this? And is there a possibility that I can get back to playing football within a year? I didn't know anyone who had done it before, and that was definitely a big issue. But as always, I started to dive back into the research to see what it said. Some of the research is positive, and I said it's probably worth a try, see if I can do this. So I got down to business and I jumped back into training and I started hitting my gym exercises, and I got back on the pitch and I started running. And then I noticed that this was going to be the hardest rehab that I had ever done. I would be back training, I would get a ball and I would kick it, and my knee would shift out of place, and I would drop to the floor and I would limp off with pain, and I would be out for up to a week. Now, the worst thing about this is this happened consistently every 2 weeks for 3 months. I would be training well, get a shift in my knee, and I would have to drop out. That was a really pivotal moment because it was a challenging thing to try overcome. But I did stick on path and I redesigned my program. I started to focus on performance. I started to master my warm-ups, knowing what to do before it. And I started consulting with experts as well to get their opinion on what I should be looking at. I have to say there was a lot of fear around would I ever get back again. And I think this is something that I notice in clients as well, is that the fear does take over and this can keep you stuck. And I really had to push past that fear before I could start to feel my knee recovering. So I rebuilt my fitness and I started to get back into it, and I regained confidence. I felt that my tolerance was improving, I could train more, and I stopped letting the setbacks that I was having define my progress. And then luckily, come the quarter final, I actually got called back up into the team. But when I got the text on the morning of the match, after I was so overjoyed, I was actually in this state of anxiousness. Like, would I be able to handle it or would I fail? So the match starts, I test my knee and it holds the first run. And then the game goes to extra time. So instead of playing 60 minutes, to play 80 minutes. And in fairness, my body held up. The knee held well. And this was a defining moment for my confidence again. Luckily, after we went on and actually won the championship, and I started and finished every game until the final, where actually I got taken off with 30 seconds left. But I'm going to count that as a finish. I remember driving home a couple of weeks after we won the championship and pulling in by a pier and just stopping and thinking about the year that had gone by. And I think a big part of that was the identity of the iron bar doesn't bend. And it was that idea and it was that anchor that helped me push through. And that experience has actually reshaped how I deal with all my clients, because I know that as you're going through that situation, how challenging it can be. So here's what I want you to take from this. Pain is not about injury, and recovery isn't about quick fixes. It's about rebuilding the confidence in your body so that pain no longer controls you. And I've seen it at every level, from Premier League footballers to international athletes to parents and professionals, people who thought that they would never ever train again. So if you've been stuck, or if you've been avoiding movement, or if you feel like you've tried everything and there's no other option, there is another way. You don't need to be an athlete. You don't need to push through pain all the time. You just need a structured plan. And I've helped hundreds of people break free from pain and rebuild their confidence again. And if it's something that you're interested in, just hit the link below and we can get you started. But honestly, if you're not that interested, it's all good. I hope that you were at least able to take something from the video. And if this was interesting to you, I would absolutely love if you could hit like and subscribe, as I'm going to put out more videos like this very soon. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.